Wow, I can't believe it. We're already into episode 30, and it is my delight pleasure to introduce Jill Hart, the Coaches Alchemist and host of You Are the World Order Showcase podcast, on a mission to empower coaches to be the change they seek in the world by helping them share their message. Having interviewed close to 400 coaches so far, she's come to see the blocks keeping them from attracting clients with podcasting strategically. And yes, she does have an awesome offer to share. It is to get a copy of Be a Guest directory for coaches by going to the offer that will be posted in the link. And with that, let's welcome Jill Hart to the show. So, Jill Hart, you're on the show. I'm so excited to have you with us. And let's start with where you were and how did you become who you are as Jill, the coach alchemist and the host of this of your show.
Host of the U World Order Showcase podcast.
Yes.
Well, it all began one hot summer afternoon while I was mowing the lawn, back in the days when I was caught up in a religious cult
Okay.
called Christianity, but it was a subsect called Torah observance. When I
Oh,
was desperately hoping that God would love me because I didn't think I was lovable for a lot of different reasons. And I listened to this one podcast episode that had a huge effect on my life. And it was it was about it challenged what I thought about the Bible. Let's put it that way.
yep.
Because I had done a lot of studying. I'd spent 25 years really studying the Bible in different languages and other apocryphal stuff and the history. And I, I was really, that was my whole life. I was consumed by it. There was a time when I covered my hair, I wore only dresses, I didn't do
Oh, wow.
Christmas. I mean, when I talk about cult, it's not like your vanilla flavored Christianity like a lot of people have. This was like, I am going to do everything that I'm supposed to do and nothing that I'm not supposed to do. And it was driving me crazy. I mean, literally, people were like, you need help. And when I realized that I had been allowing myself to believe a lot of things that weren't really true about the world, that I was creating this reality for myself and that I could uncreate it.
Mm-hmm.
My whole life changed. I became happy. I got a tattoo. I was just like, and then I started closing for a health coach who had, a program, a coaching program. And I was talking to all these people that were trained to be health coaches. And I was just like, wow, you are the change that's coming. And yeah, I just knew that I needed to have a platform where they could get their voice out and their message out. Because I think truly the coaches out there that are stepping up and saying, hey, I figured out this solution to this problem that a lot of us are facing. Menopause is a good example. When I just went into menopause, I called my mom and she gave me like really bleak information and not very good advice. And now, the people that are hitting menopause, they're prepared. They know what's coming. They know how to get help. They know what to do. It's just like, and they know that there's hope on the other end. I mean, if you like fix your diet up, it's not so bad.
Well, and it's very interesting because I'm hoping to have Dr. Victoria on the show
Mhm.
later. And her whole, like, if I could sum up her whole thing, and she was a medical doctor who left her practice
Mhm.
um, to help all people, not just the few that were in her practice. Everything comes down to hormone.
Mhm.
Male, female, young, old, it doesn't matter whether it's acne, menopause, overweight, eating issues, like brain function. And I was like, what? And she goes, hormones. How many doctors don't even check your hormones?
If they do, they try to do a blood test, not a saliva test. And hormones come in pairs. That's why we call it balancing.
Well, they actually come in four different hormones. So, anyways, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going down there, but I'm just saying. Like,
Yeah, there's
and
lots
so,
of doctors that are like leaving the profession, becoming health coaches, and doing way more
yeah,
to actually help people than they were allowed to do as doctors.
yeah. And so when okay, so when you got into this cult, was that from your family or you married into it or you found it on your own or like
I sort of married into it. My husband, when I first met him, he was part of a church that really was trying to study the Bible from its original languages. And I'd never heard of that before. It always fascinated me. And I had, when I was young, like a teenager, I had certain ideas about how the universe went together.
Mhm,
And I honestly have come full circle. But the the my perception of what Christianity was supposed to be
mhm,
was vastly different than what it ended up being. Like I went through Catholicism sort of,
mhm.
and there's good parts and bad parts, and then Judaism, and I was trying to like balance it all out, and I was trying to make the Old Testament and the New Testament fit together, and they don't. They're two fundamentally different pieces, which you may or may not want to talk about this, but
That's
it's
okay.
just like
I
it.
asked.
Okay, if you look at the New Testament, it's mostly written by Paul, and the other people that have written in there aren't generally who most people think they are. But Paul writes a bunch of stuff, and then everybody else that writes, whose work is collected in there, if you read it, they're diametrically opposed to what they're just the other side of the argument for whatever Paul says. They are fundamentally saying, no, all of that other stuff from Judaism is true. What you're doing over here is wrong. And there can be a case made for Paul being the Antichrist that's talked about in the New Testament. It was just like when I started wrapping my head around those ideas,
Mhm,
and really that's all they are. I'm not saying this is true. I'm not saying anybody has to believe me. It's just for me, when I started thinking about, okay, what about this? And it was just like, I'm done with it. I
mhm,
don't need any of this. I
mhm.
can just be me. And if people don't like me, that's fine. They can just not like me. I'm going to live in a world that I'm going to create on my own that, you know, things are good. There's lots of opportunity.
Well, and it's interesting that you brought the Bible up because I've been in many conversations. I used to run women's Bible study. I used to,
Mhm.
and I'd be like, "What? What? Like, what?" And, and then people are like, "Well, it says in the Bible," and I go, "Well, it's still an opinion." And they said, "How could the Bible be an opinion?" And I said, "Because the main books of the Bible have been taken out from the original writings. The Lord's Prayer isn't what we think it is.
It can
It's
be
been
anything you want it to
no, but
be. It doesn't matter.
it's been so changed from the original writings. And so then it comes to like the time where we are right now, whether it's the church, whether it's schools, whether it's government, whether it's our own individual beliefs. What lie have we believed in? What untruths have we been keeping from what, because, well, our grandparents did and our great grandparents. I was like, okay, we're in a different world. We're in a different time. Those might have worked for them. It doesn't work for us. And that's
It didn't really
okay.
even work for them. So many people have been killed in the name of religion and
Well, and
Christianity in particular.
well, I know, but
It's
I'm saying
horrifying.
take religion out of it. Like take our school system.
Mhm,
The school system is still built and teaches as if we have factories, that everyone's going to go work in a factory. They haven't
mhm.
really changed the curriculum since the 50s.
Yep.
And so this is what's so fascinating with podcasting and these shows that I find is that you can hear people's people changing.
Mhm,
It's like who they were Monday of last week isn't who they are Monday of this week. And heck, who I was an hour ago isn't who I am today or like this hour. And it's happening so fast. And it's like, for me, it feels like all the church, all the Bible, all the, well, you got to believe this. You got, I go, no, I don't. That's still outside of us trying to believe something that's a lie. Because ultimately, whether you believe in this or not, it comes down to God, right? God has
mhm.
already blessed us with all his abundance, his wishes, his everything. It's for us to lift the veil to see it is here.
And we are him.
Yeah. We are the light that are supposed to shine in this earth school. If we make our life hard, we are choosing that. He's not choosing that.
Right.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
has experiences through us, but we are all connected. And when I finally realized that, I was like, the world is good.
Well, and so this makes it even more fascinating. So, one, how does your husband feel about your awakening to, hmm, I don't know if this is what I believe anymore?
Well, he was never really one much to go to church because
Okay.
he was always in, he drove over the road for, so
Okay.
he was home for like 3 days a month.
Oh, wow.
And um, so we had an interesting relationship. We've been married a long time and
Yeah.
he's retired and I kind of came to all of these conclusions as he was retiring. So I he he is kind of coming more and more over to my way of thinking. I don't I don't press him on it. I don't talk about religion with him at all.
Well, and so
And
that even makes it more interesting. So, you're doing what you called the cult, right? This religious thing, you're doing your thing, and he's off counting the miles down the highway,
yeah.
right? So he's really not in it
Mhm.
because he's doing his own church in his own way,
Yeah.
right? As a long, like I used to be on the road a lot. So as a long haul, like you know that you got a lot of time to think and to contemplate and to, right. So he's in his own church, you're in your church, you come together for a couple of days a month. So
Mhm.
basically you were a single mom.
Mhm.
Wow.
I've been married to two different men for over 40 years of my life. I've been married since I was 20,
Right.
except for like 5 days between the two husbands.
Okay, I gotta
And
hear
they're
that
both
story.
on the same, their birthdays are both on the same day,
That's
which was
funny.
totally bizarre.
So
I left
really
my
5
first,
days?
yeah, I was divorced for 5 days and then I married my current husband.
Wow.
And we all get together. I mean, my husband now and my ex-husband are friends. They get along.
Well, okay, so that brings us to what we were talking before we started. Is it's all about the unity, right?
Mhm.
And and there's nothing better if you have to have divorce that you're all friends. that the kids aren't
Yeah.
being pulled apart in between. And who do we choose? And it's like, oi, enough.
There was part of that in the beginning. Um, and I have an older daughter. She's 40, almost 42. Um, she's she's had some trauma over it, but we had three more children. I have five kids altogether.
Yeah.
So I had three more children, and they grew up in the country. The other two live in San Diego, and we go and see them, and they're all of them are adults now, and they most of them have children of their own, and so we go and we do stuff with the kids, and there's the normal family drama that happens in most
Yeah.
families, but
Well, and you were a kid too,
yeah.
raising all these kids on your own. Wow. And that's so what's so fascinating is because when I first met you, I would have never thought this is what you're going to say for the podcast because because we met on the woo. The more wooey we get along.
Mhm.
And so it fascinates me when I meet people who were in the cults or in the church, so especially the Catholic, right? Um that where
I
is
like
it?
the mystery of the Catholicism. That's what
Well,
really drew
no,
me
okay,
in.
but that's the craziness about it, especially with the Catholics, is they talk about going to the conclave. And I'm not sure if you know, but for the listeners, I'll explain what a conclave is. So a conclave is when the higher beings of the church, the leadership of the church, go and lock themselves in a room, right? They in the room have the only key to unlock it. No one from outside can come in unless they open the door. Sometimes it'd be an hour, sometimes it'd be a day, sometimes it'd be 40 days until they got the direction from God how to proceed. And now it's like um no one's taking that time to go inward. We're so busy outwarding, doing that we forgot that we're beings of
Yes.
spirit. And I find even just in the last couple months with the roller coaster of everything that people are starting to say, "Ooh, maybe I got to go in a bit. Maybe I got to turn my phone off and just kind of be with what my heart's feeling." What are your thoughts?
I think, having talked to a number of people about this, that next month is going to be really interesting. I think there's going to be some stuff that happens that are going to make people kind of step back even more than they're stepping back now and saying, yeah, I'm not going to buy into that anymore. I'm going to choose to. Marissa Pierce has a great line, and I love this line. Just tell yourself a better lie, because they're all lies.
But they
Eh, We
are.
we all create our own realities, and if the reality that you're creating for yourself isn't working for you, make up another one.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah. Well, and I know with the clients I've been working with is getting out of the lies of the head, of the conditioning, the
Mhm,
untruths that they've been told, and getting them to turn inward into their heart because their heart will never lie to them because that's where
mhm.
God lives. And whether you believe in God, I don't care. Spirit, your higher self, whatever. Your
I
heart is your heart and nothing will change, right? And I
mhm.
also know from what I've been feeling energetically and what my guides have been saying to me is we're not saying we won't have some bumps in the road, but we're through the biggest shift that this planet will ever see. It's now, how are we coming back together as community and unity and building a better world?
Yeah. I think that process is going to look a lot different than people might think it's going to look. I believe that we will come to a point where we lose the borders and um the
Lose the
wars,
governments.
lose the governments. Yeah. I'm an anarchist, totally. I, in the real sense of the word anarchy, I believe that everybody should have personal responsibility for their lives, and everybody should have access to the things that they need, and you shouldn't have to fit in the box because somebody told you you have to fit in this box. You should be able to do what you were brought here to do. You have a
Well,
reason for being and a thing that you're here to contribute.
and that was what was so hard for me growing up. I I had my own drumming, and it just like, and then it'd be like, we'll sit in school. Why? There's a whole big world out there to, you know. And then it was even the simplest thing as, because of my name, I always got put at the door. Do you think I'm hearing anything looking out the window? No. But if you put my back on the window, I'd hear everything in the classroom. Not one teacher ever figured that out. And it's on my report card for 6 years. We could only keep her attention in the room. Don't put me on the door. So then when I went to university, I went to sit by the door and I'm like, oh, even you know you can't do this. Pick up my books and went over to the window. So I caught everything going on in the class. And
Yeah.
it's choosing to understand our own individual reasons, how we play in the collective.
And being allowed to just exist in the collective
Yeah.
the way we're supposed to, and not have to like have a label because you're different. Well, newsflash, everybody's different.
Yeah.
You might try to not be different, but it's just not possible. We are all not the same.
Yeah. Well, and I
And
think Barbara Streisand said it the best when she says, what a boring world this would be if we were all the same. Right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It, the innovations and the the great thinkers of the world, they're all a little odd.
Yeah.
You know, Tesla and Einstein and people like that, they didn't conform, they didn't fit in those boxes. In fact, almost everybody that even Steve Jobs doesn't have a college degree.
Yeah.
A lot of these big movers are not, they didn't go through that system to
Yeah.
get there. They thought outside the box.
Well,
They hung on to who they were.
yeah, and I'm glad for those oddballs because or else I wouldn't be here. I was like, oh, see, there's other people like me that just, you know, have their own drum beating and it's okay. Like
Mhm.
every every world needs all of us to work together in unison, and and it's also for me, I've never felt like I was born for a time better than right now.
Yeah.
Like for the
And
first half of my life, I was like, what am I doing here? I don't get it. Right?
do you remember the 70s?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's yeah, lung. Yeah.
I to this day, I still think of the 70s. When I think of the 70s, I think of khaki, that sand brown.
Oh,
It was like, I wanted to be part of the 60s. I wanted to be a teenager in the 60s because things were happening then. It didn't seem like anything was happening in the 70s. But it was a time of kind of transition
mm-hmm.
because some big things actually did happen
Yeah.
that we had to go through as a collective, and mostly around women and other ethnicities. Um,
Well, it's a very empowering time.
it was,
Yeah.
but it also was kind of disempowering in some ways. And we were trying to figure things out.
Mm-hmm.
And, we went from the old chivalry model where women were chattel to women could do things, but then it just like all got piled onto women. And there was all this rampant divorce, and guys were just like, oh, free sex, I don't have to be married.
Yeah.
And that destroyed a lot of lives. But I think we've kind of reached um, a better equilibrium on that with the bringing in of the word boundaries, and the idea that we can come up with our idea of manners. I think boundaries is just another term for manners, and manners are just things that you did so that you could be in society and everybody knew what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
So we call those boundaries now. We let people know this is what I expect from people that I want to interact with. And I would appreciate it if you would kind of let me know what your boundaries are so that I can coexist with you, and we can have, you know, we can be comfortable together. But for a long period of time, like a couple decades, people didn't know how to interact with each other. And there was a lot of fighting because of that, I think,
Mm-hmm.
even on interpersonal levels.
Well, like for me growing up, like I think I'm a little bit younger than you. It was more like I'd see my babysitters, right?
Mhm.
Who were like, well, I want a career, but do I want to even get married? Well, am I having kids? Well, I don't know. How do you have it all? And then I'd be like,
Yeah.
well, you can have it all. And then I saw it like in my parents, like um my mom was fortunate to be able to stay home with us,
Mhm.
and she had her thing and my dad had his thing, and we were, adjusted, whatever. And then when we moved, she's like, well, I'm not sitting out in the country by myself all day. Like, and so she went to work
Mhm.
because we would leave from the bus at 20 to 8 and wouldn't come home till 4:30 from school. And so she's like, well, I'm not going to go stir crazy. So she went back to work. And it's even recently I was having this conversation with my sister, and she's like, well, no one worked. And I said, Mom was the only one that didn't work. And she goes, what are you talking about? And I go, everybody worked. In her mind, none of our aunts and uncles, none of our friends' families worked.
Oh,
Interesting, right?
interesting.
Because they were working split shifts, weekends, when, like whatever, right? Like there was always a parent home, but they never thought the parent that wasn't home wasn't working. So yeah, it was quite eye opening. I'm like, hmm, okay, I don't know where she grew up, but like, so no, like
In the house that we both lived in,
I
this
know,
is what the reality
but
was.
we had two different lives,
Mhm.
absolutely two different lives, and it's really funny, like, right, where and so it's interesting to see like kids coming now, like, 'cause the old saying used to be, women can have it all, it just might not be all at once. Right? If they're going after the career, they might not be able to naturally have kids, but they can adopt or whatever, right? So, you know, like, do you have kids right away, but then do you not get your career? Like, and now I see a huge shift, and I see this with men talking to me. How do we support the women in our lives? And I said, as they're coming home from a hard day's work, if you're home first, just let them fall into your arms. The world's beating
Yeah,
them
clean
up.
up the damn house.
Well, no, but the world's beating them up. They've had to be masculine for the whole 8 hours they've been gone, and just hold them. And like some of the best cooks I know were men, right? And um and I think it's, instead of female male, we got feminine to masculine. because the masculine has to be lessened in both
Mhm.
sexes and the feminine has to be risen. And the next 20 years is all about the feminine, not women, the feminine rising.
I see that. I have a younger daughter, she's 20,
Mm-hmm.
and she and her boyfriend are kind of in that generation
Mm-hmm.
of um gender fluidity.
Mm-hmm.
You know, she's a third degree black belt in Kempo karate, and he loves little kids. He has younger siblings. He comes from a big family, and he'll cry. You know? And it's just and they swap clothes all the time. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just it's so interesting. Really neat people. It's just like there's
Well, and I think it's really cool to watch couples like that,
mhm,
right? Because
mhm,
they just they just want to be with each other,
mhm.
right?
Not
It's
big
not like,
expectations. There's not a
yeah,
lot of pressure.
yeah. It's not like, well, you're the boy, you have to do this, and you're the girl, you have to do this. No,
Mhm.
whoever's home first, do it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Whoever wakes up with the screaming kid first, get up, right?
I see that with my with two of my other sons. Actually, all three of them, I'm sure, are like this. But the two that are younger that are close to me, I see them with their own sons, and they're just like they're so much more hands-on than I ever experienced with even well, my husband was gone all the time, and his dad lived with us for like 18 years, and they were I was it was my job. I was going to be doing it all. But I
Well,
didn't have to work.
um, you didn't get paid. You worked very, very hard.
I didn't have to work outside of the
Yeah.
home. I worked very hard. I had a homestead, and I had a dairy, a goat dairy for a while. And there was work, but not like I've been unemployable for God so many years. It's kind of
Well, I
crazy.
know, and but that's the thing, right? It's that um is, like even in my own life, I tried doing that, like, because I came from all entrepreneurs,
Mhm.
right? And um and I was just like, okay, I'm gonna go do this ladder thing. And even though I was doing the ladder thing, I really wasn't, because I was always coming in as a contractor. Oh, you need me for 3 years, or you need me for a year and a half? Perfect. Right.
Mhm.
And then and then I at the end of my corporate career, I actually took a job. And 6 months after I accepted the position, I spent the next 3.5 years figuring out how to get out of it. Because it was like, you don't get me. I don't get it. Like, if what? And so yeah, like, I mean, like, we start, I don't know if it was recording, but we started the call with me saying that even 2 days ago to where I am right this minute, 180-degree turn, because I am being tested like nobody's. Are you sure you want this? Because I was waffling for the last couple months. I'm like, I don't know. I like, what am I doing? I don't know, right? And I literally, like, was walking and walked into a brick wall of, are you ready? And I was like, holy crap. This is, there's, it's either yes or you, like, I don't even know what no was going to be. And so I said, yes, I'm ready.
Just gotta do it.
And it's like everything's changing. Everything. And I know this podcast is growing on its own, because it's just the way they do. Like, you'd probably say that too,
Mhm.
that um the people who are awake and who want to grow in the unity of what we're creating, a better sustainable life, a better world, more loving and kind and generous, and there's enough for all, because that's
Mhm.
what we've been given. It was us that kept us back. It was us that kept on putting the veils on, or the fear or whatever, and the
Mhm.
unworthiness, right? Like
Yep.
that has been a universal, I don't care what part of the country, the world you live in, we all had that at our core.
Mhm. That we're unworthy, we're not lovable, we don't
Yeah.
deserve it. And that's just like so wrong.
Yeah.
Of course we deserve it.
And
We're not born broken. We're born these perfect little beings
yeah. Well, and that brings us back to the church.
that
We
teaches that you're fundamentally broken.
You
There's
have
something
to
wrong with you.
baptize in the Catholic Church the minute they're born to
Mhm.
take away their sins.
They don't have any.
They don't have any. They're
Yeah.
pure spirit, a gift from God that
Yeah.
we are here to shepherd, not to
Yes.
control, not to, like, right?
And to
Yeah.
learn from. God, I have learned so much from my kids and my grandkids. Just like,
Oh, I have grandnieces and nephews, and it's crazy sometimes. And I don't know if it's because of me that I know the woo that they say what they say, but and even my nephews to a point, like we'd be just doing something and be like, "Well, you get it. If mom doesn't, that's her problem." There were
and
three.
sometimes they don't even really need to talk all that much.
No, no, but there were
It's like,
three when they were saying that.
yeah, I have a 3.5-year-old grandson who's just like, he talks, but he doesn't really need to talk. He doesn't need a lot of words because you just understand what he wants. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah,
and they're so beautiful to watch. Like I wish I was closer, but whatever. um,
they are lots of fun.
Well, yeah, well, because I never had kids of my own, so my nephews
Mhm.
were the closest I'll have as kids, and I did help raise them when they're little, really little. And then the next set, I'm just like, I know you're only 5 hours away, but that could be 5,000 hours away, right? You know.
5 is just a little outside the travel comfortably zone.
Well, and yeah, and I mean, and then on top of it, like with the town that they live in is the perfect stop place for halfway from Calgary to Vancouver,
Mhm.
right? And so they can jack the hotel prices up to however much they want for a little. It's not even a nice hotel. It's right,
Yeah,
And so it's like, oh come on, but that's okay. Everything in its time. That's why we have FaceTime. That's why we have Zoom, right?
yeah, we have so much more available to us right now in terms of having relationships with people that are far away.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
when my husband first started truck driving, we didn't have cell phones.
Mm.
And when I had my third son or my third child, he he was on the road and he called me right after he was born. It was
Oh,
it was so cool. We still talk about it. But we
so he
couldn't
was
tell him that there was no way to let him know that I was going to the
going to
hospital or
labor.
anything. Yeah,
Oh wow, that's
it was pretty
crazy.
cool.
Well, yeah, it's cool and crazy in the same. Well, and it's just like people, like I friends will say, "How do you know to call?" And I'm like, "Well, you called me." No, I didn't. Yeah, you did. Like if
I
you're in
heard
my
you.
head, if you're in my head a couple, three times, I'm like, okay, something's up. I'll call. Right? And they're like, okay, whatever. That's your woo woo stuff. I'm like, no, it's not. It's been happening for thousands and thousands of years. It's
Did that with my
slowing.
sister one time.
Mm.
I called her because she was just really on my mind. And she says, yeah, I was going to go on an airplane, but we got on the plane and it started shaking and they turned us around and made us come back. Like, well, okay.
Very good.
Totally get what you're saying. It's just like sometimes you just know you need
Yeah,
to call.
yeah, yeah. Um, how did you get into podcasting?
Just decided one day that's what I was going to do. How I get into most things that I do in my life. I just make the decision and then I do it.
So what other stuff do you do other than podcasting? Like what is like yeah,
What does my life look like?
yeah.
I I help coaches mainly get their voice out. That's my big thing. And I do it through a community that I have over on Facebook that's pretty active. And I do it through hosting them on my website or on my podcast. And I also do it through providing a directory for them to find places to be host or to be featured on podcasts, but also to find guests to host on them. But I also coach them on what they need to know, the fundamentals for actually being an effective guest on podcasts. And it's mostly what I do.
Cool. Well, yeah, because there's um I've been on some that were so fast I went, what? And it was over. And I was like, cool, I guess. And then others were just like, you're so engaged and you're like, how could the time be up? Like, are you joking? Like that was 5 minutes. Yeah. And I mean, and that even goes for like what I call the professional podcasters that have been around for 3,000 shows or whatever.
Mhm.
Um, some you're 5 minutes in going, yeah, not this one. Like it might be a good one, but no, you haven't caught me. If you don't catch me in the first 5, 10 minutes, I'm not listening to the hour and a half. Right. Like,
Yeah.
yeah. And, um, and I think it's very interesting how we're going back to the spoken word, even though it's through technology, because that's how civilizations kept on growing and expanding. And because of the spoken word, it was only
Storytelling.
some of the stuff that got up on the walls, some of the stuff that got written in their journals. It was the storytelling being passed generation to generation to generation. And I remember probably 20, 25 years ago saying, not, I didn't say it, but I heard someone say, it doesn't matter. We're going back to the native way. And I said, the native way? What are you talking about? Being gentle with the land, listening to the spirits, telling the stories,
Mhm.
being in community. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I'm all for that. Right. And keeping keeping the family unit, whether you're blood or not, alive. Like bring back that,
Tribe,
yeah,
tribes.
bring the tribe back.
And the tribes can be global. One of the things that I love so much about the community that I have over on Facebook is that most of the people that are part of that community do not live in the United States, all over the world. And I interview people on my podcast. It's from everywhere, like
Yeah.
Pakistan and I just like literally everywhere. I talk to people, and you know, we are we are all one. There
Mm-hmm.
doesn't there's just not that much difference between people.
No.
Yeah, we might have different customs and do different things. And I've lived in other places and I understand that, you know, not everybody doesn't do everything all the same way.
But
But even in those cultures, they don't all do things the same way. So it doesn't really matter.
well,
Just
I used to
be
always say,
nice.
I used to always say, um, there's a reason there's 101 curries. Curry isn't curry. Curry's however you decide to throw it together.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, so and I always make the joke of like, because I've from the place I was born to the furthest out I've been, 15 miles, all on the
Okay.
same road, right? Yet, if you're coming from Zimbabwe, South Africa, Timbuktu, you'll find me. and I'll be your best tour guide and I'll set you up for everything in my city because I've only lived 15 miles from the place I was born. I travel and I love people and I love meeting people from around the world, but you guys are all coming to me. I'm home.
Sometimes you got to have the person
Yeah.
that's the home base.
Yeah.
And then
And it
there's
was
other
funny.
people that they just travel.
Yeah. Um, when I used to be a tour operator, because I was just like, oh, I'm done with corporate. I'm done with all of it, right? I just got
Mhm,
to go play, get paid, and where better than our Canadian Rockies? And I was on this one tour with a small group of Germans. So it was really
mhm.
fun because there was like three single women and then they wouldn't go anywhere without me. And I'm like, oh, I got it. And they go, that's okay. We'll wait. And I'm like, okay. So, which was great. And then um, I was starting to think like, well, they're in a whole different budget category, right? Because one's a senior court judge and one's a lawyer and one's a business owner, and I'm like, I'm the bus driver. Where right? And they so they set the precedent the first night. So this trip we're on a scavenger hunt. I go, for what? The best burgers in every place. And I'm like, oh, they're even in my budget. Like they're not looking for steak and champagne and everything Lottie does. And it was so much fun. Like we laughed, we cried, we had so much fun, you know? And then I'd be like with the tour director, I'd be like, oh, hang on. And he goes, we're not going anywhere without you. And I'm like, but I don't like being late. And he goes, who's being late? And then all of a sudden my
you're the one that
stress, like, because you have some tour directors that are tapping their um their watch, right? And I'm like, a minute's not going to be a big deal. And he's like, whatever. Do you need more time to do something? I said, no, I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
that's very cool.
Yeah. And so it gave me perspective because after that group of Germans, um, they said I was speaking to them in German. I said, no, I wasn't. And they said, you were answering us. And I'm like, I was? And they're like, uh-huh, you're in the conversation. I'm like, interesting. So I know I wasn't. It was coming through me. And I guess I understood to a point. But yeah, it was just funny. But it brings back perspective, right? Of if we have differences, be kind in the differences, right? If we have hardships, be kind in the hardships because you don't know when your hardship is going to be and when you're going to need, and I think that's one thing that we've really lost is the community of knowing your neighbors,
Mhm.
of if you need a cup of sugar, you're not going to go ask your neighbor right now, which is so sad. You're going to go and get like, yeah. Anyways.
I think that has to do with where you live also, because I find that the community that I live in, I know all my neighbors. In
Mm-hmm.
fact, two doors down are my son's in-laws. Their parents. I see my daughter-in-law drive by all the time because
Yeah.
they own the local restaurant or one of the local restaurants, and it's just like people help each other in this community.
So,
Everybody knows each other, and
so
there's
you're a
one
smaller
grocery store.
community.
Oh yeah, we're
Yeah.
small. There's maybe 5,000 people that live here.
Yeah. Well, I'm 1.4 million.
Yeah, well, that's different.
Yeah. And I still only stay to my one little corner. And I mean, and that goes back to even when I was young. Like I'd be like saying to friends, "Are we going down to downtown, like our little corner, or are we
Mhm.
going to real downtown?" Nah, who wants to go real downtown? Like, right? Yeah, I mean, and even that, like the energy down there is so different.
We're quite a ways from that kind of population density.
Hmm.
We have our big town, which is either Logan, which is maybe 20,000 people, maybe 30. And
Oh,
then
wow.
that's an hour one way, and then an hour the other way is Pocatello, and that's the same thing. They're just not huge communities, but we're about 2.5 hours from Salt Lake, which is a
Mm. I know
big place.
Pocatello.
And
Stayed there many times on the way down to California.
yeah.
Yeah, because it was a good stop. Like after driving 11 hours,
Mhm.
that it's a good stop, and then you're fresh to tackle Salt Lake in the rush hour to get past it before all the big bypass highways, right? Like,
If you ever take that route again, there's a
mm,
little town called Lava Hot Springs, which is about, I don't know, 45 minutes from Pocatello,
okay,
continuing south, on 15, and then you have to like
go
jupe
down.
over off of the freeway, to actually get to the little town. But there's a great hotel there. It's called the Riverside Inn, and it's a historic hotel. Teddy Roosevelt stayed there when he
Okay,
was up looking at Yellowstone, and just really, really rustic, but nice,
okay.
and hot springs.
Well, and like
And they
so.
take dogs, but not children.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Um, so like that's one of my ultimate goals with the podcast and what I do is to be able to just always be traveling,
Mhm.
right? And go to these quaint little places, and as long as they have internet, I can work.
Yeah.
You know, because that I mean, long before I even knew about my company, about anything, I saw myself on a beach. I was like, really? Okay, right? Because you
Which
know,
beach?
oh, who knows? I have no idea. I
Interesting
know.
when you find out.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love beaches and they're grounding, and I've I have friends now that have moved to Mexico full time. So I think maybe maybe not. I don't. We'll see.
Yeah, it's an
But
adventure.
well, and I don't want to do it alone. So I mean, the partner does have to show up.
They will.
Yeah.
Right time.
Oh, we've been circling for so many years. Like we were up in the mountains one day, and I was like, dang it. And my girlfriend goes, what? And I go, I can feel them. And she goes, well, we're here for a couple days. I'm like, okay. And I just kind of said, I'm available. And we never did connect. And then other places, they'd be like, yep, he's here. Yeah. Timing's everything, you know.
Yep.
And I always said I never wanted the first one that got divorced, so I just skip that one and take the second one for life.
I like that.
Yeah. Well, and then so this is what was really interesting. So I remember talking to friends when I was working corporate over lunch one day, and my one friend was having troubles with her partner, and I said, so I was probing her, like, is he the one for you? And she goes, well, why wouldn't he be? We've been together 6 years. And I said, well, that's fair. I said, but 6 years is a long time to wait for a ring, right? Like to show commitment. And then I said, well, I know when my person comes, he's going to fit me like a glove. And she goes, you don't know that. And my other friend looked at me. She goes, yes, she does. Because I just know, like, we're going to know each other. We're just going to fit and it's going to be lovely.
Yeah, it will. And it's going to happen in an amazing way. And
Yeah. Because, yeah, he's circling. I don't know
mm,
how he's showing up, but he's circling. It's all right for me. So, as we're coming to the end of this wonderful conversation of like, woo the church, woo the cults, woo the, woo the woo woo.
woo the world.
Yeah, the woo world. And just beautiful things that I know are happening for all of us. What would you want to say to the audience?
Step into who you are and just own it because the world needs you. They don't need the thing that you think you should be. Just be you. We're waiting for you.
And that is so important because everyone else is taken. Okay. Thank you, Jill Hart. It's been a pleasure having you on this show.
Thanks, Adele. It's been great chatting with you.
Yeah. Wow. Did you guys take away some stuff from that podcast? Wasn't expecting the she's in a cult. But hey, we all have our journeys to travel, and Jill has been on her journey, and now she's sharing her light to the world as we all need to do. This is a new world, and I think the most that I got out of this conversation with Jill today was that we are in a new world and we are shining our light in the best way we can to move forward and build that community of kindness and cooperation. That it's no matter if you live in a town of 500 people or you live in a city of 5,000 people, know your neighbors, get to know them, share the coffee. Anyways, it was great to have Jill on the call. Everything will be in the show notes, and we'll see you next time.